Wife and AP weren't aware that Wimp is around. You won't believe my hilarious revenge cheating story. Hope you enjoy our today's story. First of all, my name is John, and that's not a joke. I'm 6 feet 5 inches tall and weigh 275 pounds, so people call me Big John, like the Jimmy Dean song from the early 60s. I don't work in mines, but I build houses for a living. Because of this, I've gotten strong from lifting wood and hammering nails. I could probably take on the imaginary John, but it would be a close match. We don't use air hammers because my boss believes in doing things by hand. He tells customers that every joint is made as if we were going to live in the house ourselves. He likes to say that we've personally handled every nail in the house. Does this make the house better? CR@P, I don't know. I do know people line up to have their houses built by us, and that keeps money in my pocket for the high-priced CR@P. Julie, that's my wife, loves to show off to her friends. One final point about me that may help you understand later events. I've never been beaten at arm wrestling, and I've won a lot of money from fools who thought their grip was stronger than mine. Let me now tell you about Julie, who has been my lifelong companion since we first met 20 years ago. I was lost when I saw the small blonde girl for the first time. I started a campaign to persuade her to say I do, knowing that I had to have her. Trouble was, she hung around with the in crowd, you know, the football jocks whose parents kept them in a new car every couple of years. They gave them money to take their dates to fancy places like clubs in Savannah. Now, before you say they can't get into clubs under 18, grow up. When senator or legislator kids show up, the ID checker isn't too strict. To them, everyone in that group looks well over 18. Anyway, Julie's boyfriend was Stan Grubbs, known as Meat. If I have to explain why he was called Meat, you're too young to read this story, so close this and go back to playing ball. Like I said, Julie seemed completely awed by Stan, and I wouldn't have bet a plugged nickel I'd ever have a chance with her. I didn't either until she had finished college and returned home to find only us working-class nerds still around. I vividly recall my initial encounter with her in Tony's pharmacy. She had recently graduated and started working at our neighborhood bank as an assistant manager. During her half-day off, she had stopped by Tony's where there was still a soda fountain to get a milkshake. Let me get that, Julie, I handed the clerk enough to cover both our shakes. She clearly had trouble remembering me. Who? No, don't tell me. I never forget a face. She followed me back to a booth, apparently still trying to place me. I know you were in my class, and judging from your size, you must have played football, but I just can't. Don't worry about it. We never traveled in the same circles, and no, I didn't play football. Too busy studying at night and working after school to help mom with the bills. John Turner, is it really you? Her face lit up like she was really glad to see me. You won't believe this, but up until our junior year, I had the biggest crush on you. Of course, at that age, I didn't dare let on, and besides, you hardly paid any attention to little old me. I didn't know what to say. I just stared at this woman who looked like Nicole Kidman telling me she once liked me. I couldn't believe it, but seeing she didn't have a ring on her finger, I wasn't going to miss my chance. So I asked her if she wanted to go to the dance at the American Legion hut next Friday night. I was shocked when she said yes. From that first dance, we were always together. 9 months later, I married the most beautiful girl in the state, or even the country, at least in my eyes. Our new home was just outside the town, sandwiched between 10 acres of heavily forested terrain accessible only by driving across what appeared to be a wagon track. From SC61, you wouldn't imagine a house existed back there if you didn't know it was there. Salespeople never disturbed us, and our 2 children and their dogs could run around freely without any worries at all. The only danger would be snakes, and as long as the German pointer was with them, no snake had better show. His hide, any other varmint, either 2- or 4-legged, would find himself on the business end of a pair of pearly sharp teeth belonging to Bruno, our black lab Rottweiler cross, that would protect the kids with his life. Yes, sir, I had it all. A wife I dearly loved and who was crazy about me. A couple of kids anyone could be proud of. Between the 2 of us, money was no problem, and the one thing I had worried about when we first married, I'd finally been able to forget about. Yeah, I know I got you wondering, so I won't try to hide it any longer. You see, that old saw about telling how much a man's packing by looking at the size of his hands and feet is a bunch of. As I told you, I'm a big man, bigger than the usual guy, but my package is just normal, a shade over 6 inches with a girth of about 1½ an inch across. I haven't seen many others since I wasn't a jock or in service, but from what I could read, I was just about average, maybe a little over, but not much. For the first few years of our marriage, I'd concerned about how I measured up, so to speak, since I knew Julie had dated a guy named Meat. She tried her best to reassure me that I knew how to use my talents, and I did read a lot about how to please women. She seemed to enjoy every kiss we shared. If she didn't, she was a better actress than Nicole Kidman, who she looked a lot like. You know, I'm a big, tough guy, but I'm also very kind-hearted. I got used to letting Julie have whatever she wanted, and if I ever said no, her tears always changed my mind. I couldn't stand seeing a woman cry, probably because of all the times I saw my mom cry. I'm obviously clueless when it comes to recognizing real love. I never had any idea Julie was unhappy with our life until that fateful night back in 2011. As usual, I intended to go out to Nick's bar with my buddies, where we'd spend the hours between knocking off time and midnight drinking beer, playing pool, and just shooting the in general. That's what I planned to do. That's what Julie expected me to do. But it wasn't what I did. Instead, I got to think about that sweet woman I had waiting at home, and after only a little better than an hour, it was just getting dark. I told the gang bye and headed home. Now, I've already told you about the road leading to the front of our house, but I didn't mention the back road, the one that led by the barn and stables. It wasn't any better, but I usually took it so I could stop by and make sure the animals were taken care of. Since the kids were at the Grand for the weekend, I didn't know if Julie would remember. I need not have worried, my little sweetheart had everything under control. So I parked at the barn and walked onto the house. Julie always gets sore if I track dirt through the house, so we have a bench on the back porch where I take off my work boots and grab the bedroom slippers that were always waiting there for me. It was an early autumn night, and Julie had the windows up, trying to save on air conditioning costs, so the only thing separating me from our den was 10 feet of space and a screen wire. I could see what was happening in the den just as well as if I'd been sitting inside, but since I was sitting in the dark, no one inside could see me. I hadn't really looked inside until I heard a man's voice say, "Relax." Julie answered, "John won't be back until Nick's closes at midnight. Until then, we have the place to ourselves, and I'm yours to do with as you please." With those words, my world ended. Now, some would think I'm a wimp or maybe crazy, and I won't argue either, but something I can't explain took over me, and I started acting in a way I never imagined I would. I'd read about husbands who watched their wives with other men and enjoyed it, but I never thought I'd be one of them. Well, I'm not exactly one of them. Usually, those husbands get excited and do things while watching. All I did was silently cry as I watched my world fall apart. Sure, I could have burst in and fought Stan and maybe even Julie, but what would that accomplish? This was her old boyfriend back in our lives, and I knew that if I stopped them now, they'd just find another time and place to be together, and then I wouldn't be able to get the pictures I needed for the divorce. Julie and Stan were sitting on the sofa facing me, so I had a perfect view as they kissed. I got some great shots of him getting intimate with my wife, and I can see the big one that gave him the nickname, Meat. Really, I don't know how else to describe it that I thought she always refused to give me. VJ said it was nasty. I continued to watch and snap pictures of the act. "Baby, you got me so hot. I just gotta plant this thing as deep as I can get it," he said. I managed to get a few good snapshots of it at various positions. At that point, I figured I had enough pictures and was about to leave them to their pleasures when Stan made the fatal mistake. Like many men, he just couldn't keep his mouth shut and accept what had been offered. Instead, he had to brag a bit. "You said mine was the best rod you ever had. Did you mean it?" "Yeah, baby, I meant every word. That thing reaches places that haven't been experienced anything since high school." I could tell by his expression those words pleased him. "What about Big John? His isn't as big as mine, honey, not even close. Don't get me wrong, he does a good job, but there's a big difference between riding in a Volkswagen and a Corvette compared to you and him." Julie got hold of a towel that she must have brought in earlier and gave herself a quick wash. "You still good for round 2? They started again. I was shocked that Julie went along with him when he started talking trash about me, saying I wasn't man enough to keep my woman. Instead of defending me or at least staying quiet, she joined in, saying things like, "No, baby, my little wimpy husband can't compare to you." She made other remarks, but by then, I was furious, and you can imagine the kind of stuff they were saying. I finally had enough. I thought about what to do and suddenly had an idea. Things were finally going my way. I managed to sneak up right behind Stan without either of them noticing me. His nuts were swinging back and forth just as she finished. Stan said, "Here it comes, baby. Maybe you can get hubby to clean you up when he gets home." "Good idea," she replied. "He'll leave it just like you. I'll bet he'll be so D&K. He'll probably not know the difference." At that time, my right hand was almost around that dangling nutsack, and my left hand was only inches from his thick head of hair. He was one of those men who like to strut around wearing their hair in a ponytail. "What do you want to bet, baby?" I said, grasping his nuts and jerking his head back at the same time. The results were amazing. With a scream, Stan just passed out as I continued to squeeze and twist while pulling his head back as hard as I could. Julie jumped up, tried to cover herself, and pleaded, "Please don't hurt us, John. This ain't what it looks like." "Well, what the hell is it, Julie?" "It looks like the woman I was sure I'd spend the rest of my life with is screwing her old boyfriend behind my back." "What do you have to say to that?" By now, she was sobbing. You weren't supposed to find out." "Yeah, but I did. You did witch." By now, I'm sure Stan wasn't feeling a thing, so I dropped my hold on him and started toward Julie. I was almost to her when I noticed she was staring at my hand. That was the first time I realized I'd brought a fistful of his hair with me. I must have looked like an Apache warrior holding a fresh scalp. I threw it aside and reached for my wife. Her scream was pure terror, but she was too scared to run. Not that she could have escaped anyway. I grabbed her and sat down in my easy chair, pulling her across my lap. I realized I should have done this long ago because there had been many signs she was cheating. I was just a street-id husband in love and refused to see the truth. They say hindsight is 20/20, so who am I to argue? Love covers a multitude of sins, so I didn't hurt her much when I thought she had enough. I dropped her on the floor and kicked her clothes toward her. "Better get dressed," I said. "You need to take your friend to the." She complied without one word of backtalk, except to ask if I wasn't going to dress her lover before loading him in the car for her. "Nope, he got himself naked without the help of this wimp, so he can get undressed without it also," I replied. He cried as I dumped his ass in the backseat of her car. I must admit, I just couldn't resist the temptation to give his balls just one more squeeze, causing him to pass out again. I doubt he felt the bumps on the drive to the hospital. When Julie got in the car, he still wasn't making a sound. "Your stuff will be on the porch when you get back," I told her. "John, can't we get around this?" Tears were running down her cheeks. This really meant nothing to me. It was just a no-string-attached thing. I remained quiet. It may have been just a no-string-attached thing to her, and we might have been able to work something out if she hadn't badmouthed me while she was sleeping with her lover boy. But she did, and I'd be hearing those words echoing in my mind for years. She looked so lost I almost gave in, but like I read in the Reddit stories, any man who did that was a spineless wimp. And that just wasn't me. No sir, not this boy. I'm sure she expected me to relent because of what she hit me with next. But I don't have anywhere to go. She was trying so hard that it was hard to understand her. Still, I stood firm like Stonewall Jackson. She had one last thing to say while her lover lay in the back seat. "If you forgive me, I'll testify that he fell and hurt himself when your trial comes up." "Trial? What trial?" I caught him with my wife. "There's not going to be a trial. He got what he deserved, plain and simple." I turned my back on the woman I thought I'd spend my life with. I was still stewing when I heard her fire the engine up and drive out of my life. That's the last I'll see of her, I thought as the whisper of tires on asphalt faded into the distance. I felt very proud of myself. Nobody was ever going to call me a wimp. When I awoke next morning, her things were gone from the porch, and I was all set to begin my new life, with my first task being to find a trustworthy wife after the divorce, of course. I can't stand to even think about it, but I feel I'd be cheating my readers if I didn't at least sum up the story. It seems that her claim that she had nowhere to stay was untrue. 2 of the largest police officers you've ever seen arrived at my door the following day. I was hauled off to the pokey. I discovered Julie had cleared out our joint account months prior. When I was attempting to post bail, I had just enough money left over for household expenditures. Because my new address was the jailhouse, so I wasn't really in need of anything. With no resources, I had to rely on a public defender, a young guy who probably had never been in a courtroom before. Long story short, after the DA finished talking about how I had ruined my innocent wife and her old schoolmate who just happened to stop by, I was lucky to get only 3 years, reduced to probation if I signed the house and land over to Julie. It could have been much worse if I didn't have the pictures, which the judge didn't let the jury see, but they probably influenced his decision on the punishment. I had to think about it, but I finally agreed. Why, you ask? I thought of Bubba and his friends waiting for the lights to go out in prison. I could handle one Bubba, but there are never just one in prison. So now I rent a place on the lake. It's not much, but I fixed it up nicely on my own dime, of course. It's a roof over our heads when I pick up the kids for my weekends, since my parents and in-laws took my side. I still get a good home-cooked meal pretty often. Yes, I still enjoy the LW area of literature, but I don't take the comments about what I should have done too seriously. From personal experience, I know you just can't do that stuff in today's world. Second story is she doing it again. I am 27, have been with my 25-year-old partner for 12 years. About 7 years into our relationship, she asked for a break. During this 2-month separation, she was out every night. Obviously, I had hints that she was meeting other guys, but I never asked. We weren't together. One night, she came home crying. I had to be there because she didn't have a babysitter for our 3 kids. She just lay on my lap, crying a lot. I realized then that she had been with someone else, and I think her mom found out and scolded her, making her feel terrible. After that night, she said she made a mistake and regretted leaving me. I was really happy to be back with her because she's the love of my life, so any worries I had about her being with other people kind of went away. Skipping ahead 3 years, last year, a friend of mine messaged my partner saying she found messages between her and her boyfriend. She told me that he had admitted to sleeping with her. He and my friend weren't a couple at the time. She told my partner that if she didn't tell me, then my friend would. My partner told me. I was heartbroken. Not about the making love, but about the lies. She deceived me so much during our break. She used to mock my crying, told me that she didn't love me, and was clearly seeing someone behind my back. Looking back on those times, I remember how badly she treated me, and she's still lying now, saying it was only one time. She says it wasn't something she planned and that she hated every minute of it. What she doesn't know is that right before our break, I saw her messaging another man, and I believe she left me to be with him. One of my neighbors during our break asked if I was back home since she saw me come back around 11 in the night before, but I wasn't there, so I think it was either more than once with this other guy or more than one other guy. Well, I got past all of that. It's been 4 years since, and we've had some amazing years together, so I wanted to stay. But lately, she's been acting like she did before we broke up again. She never spends time with me, calls me boring, goes through my phone, cuts off making love, and says I'm annoying. All of it. Am I going crazy, or is she doing it again? I broke up with her today because I can't go through heartbreak like that again. She doesn't even care that I've told her I want to leave. Do you think she's cheating?